Top 10 Ancient Egyptian Myths, Egyptian Gods and Mythology. The ancient Egyptians really seemed to have it all. They built the astonishing pyramids, crafted volumes of myths, and lived along the gorgeous, if not tempestuous, banks of the River Nile. As with any ancient culture, the Egyptians used mythology to try to explain the world around them. While some Egyptian myths explained nature's phenomena, others were told to make sense of the human condition, death and dying, love, deceit, and treachery. Regardless of their aim, myths are full of beautiful symbolism, often touting some virtue or human quality to aspire to. People across the globe continue to pour through volumes of ancient mythological tales, and with good reason. They tell us so much about our ancestors. Let's take a look at some examples of popular myths told by the ancient Egyptians. 1. The Egyptian creation myth. Before there was anything, there was none. Nothingness. Water in every direction as far as the eye could see. From none, a single thought emerged and became the god Ra. Ra began speaking and everything he said came into being. He spoke and his 2 children were born. One night, while Ra slept, his children wandered into the darkness and became lost. Ra was devastated when he woke, so he plucked out his own eye, he only had one, and sent it searching for his lost children. As he waited for their return, he created a new eye to replace the one he had sent out to search. Ra's original eye eventually found Shu and Tefnut and returned them to Ra, who was so overjoyed he wept and wept. His tears became the first human beings. 2. Ma'at, the goddess of morality. Ma'at was the goddess of truth, justice, and morality. She was the daughter of Ra and wife of the moon god, Thoth. She weighed the hearts of the dead to decide who should have eternal joy in the afterlife. Her feather of truth was the determining factor. Once placed on a scale, if the deceased's heart was heavier than her feather, they would not be permitted to journey to paradise. If the heart was deemed too heavy, a demon would devour it, causing the deceased to die a second time. 3. The Death of Osiris. The god Osiris rules over Egypt and is well loved by all. His brother, the god Seth, is jealous of Osiris's good fortune. He traps Osiris in a box and throws him into the Nile. By the time Isis, Osiris's wife, finds the box, Osiris has died. She brings his body back to Egypt for burial, but Seth cuts his brother's corpse into 14 pieces and scatters them throughout Egypt. Isis is so devastated she weeps for weeks. This causes the flooding of the Nile. She searches the land and eventually finds all but one of the pieces. With the help of the funeral god, Anubis, Isis brings her husband back to life. Unfortunately, because he is not whole, Osiris can only remain in the land of the living for one night. The next morning, Isis wakes up alone. Osiris has taken his place as the god of the underworld. Set takes the throne of Egypt. He doesn't know, however, that Isis is now pregnant with Osiris's child, Horus, who will eventually avenge his father. 4. Isis and the 7 scorpions. Isis hides her pregnancy and the birth of Horus from Set. She plans to raise Horus to be strong and good and to prepare him to overthrow his uncle. Serket, the goddess of venomous creatures, arranges to have 7 of her most powerful warriors, disguised as scorpions, stay with Isis and Horus as their bodyguards. Pretending to be mortal, Isis roams from village to village, relying on the charity of the people she encounters. In one village, a wealthy woman slams her door in Isis's face, refusing to give her and her baby food or shelter. In retaliation, the scorpion bodyguards give all their venom to the strongest among them. That night, the scorpion stings the son of the wealthy woman. When Isis realizes what has happened, she recites a powerful incantation to nullify the poison and bring the boy back to life. When the wealthy woman realizes who Isis really is, she apologizes and offers her all of her riches. 5. Battle for the throne. When Horus comes of age, he appears before the council of the gods and asks them to remove Set from power and grant him the throne. The gods and goddesses are unsure of what to do. While Set's actions were terrible, he has kept Egypt safe from its enemies. They fear that without Set as pharaoh, Egypt could fall into chaos. For over 80 years, Set and Horus battle viciously for the throne with neither emerging as the obvious victor. In one fight, Set plucks out Horus's eyes. The goddess Hathor gives them back to him. Horus nearly drowns Set in a boat race, but Set transforms into a hippopotamus and sinks Horus's boat. Eventually, Ra himself sends word to the underworld asking for Osiris's opinion. Not surprisingly, Osiris says his son should rule Egypt. With that, the council rules for Horus, and Set gives up the throne. Horus takes his place as the ruler god of Egypt. 6. Rhodopis, the Egyptian Cinderella. Rhodopis was a Greek girl who had been kidnapped by pirates and sold into slavery. Although she is teased by the other slaves for her light hair and pale skin, she kind-hearted. She is also a beautiful dancer. The Egyptian who purchased Rhodopis buys her a pair of rose-red slippers to wear when she dances. One day, the pharaoh announces he will hold a large festival for all to attend. The other slaves give Rhodopis extra work so that she is unable to attend. While washing clothes in the river, she takes off her slippers. Just then, an enormous falcon swoops down, snatches one of the slippers, and flies away. Rhodopis knows that this falcon is the god Horus and that he must have some need for her slipper, so she simply tucks its mate into her robes and continues her work. Horus takes the slipper to the pharaoh and drops it into his lap. The pharaoh, aware that Horus is sending him a message, informs everyone that he will marry the woman who fits into the slipper. He travels up and down the Nile, searching for the owner of the slipper. Rhodopis is frightened by the barge and the pharaoh's soldiers and hides in the rushes as the other slaves try on the slipper. The barge is just about to leave when the pharaoh spies Rhodopis in her hiding spot. She tries on the slipper, which fits perfectly, and then removes its mate from her robes, proving that they are hers. The pharaoh tells everyone within earshot that she will be his queen. 7. The Princess of Bekhten, a god who saved a princess. Pharaoh was visiting Nahern, collecting his annual tributes, when the Prince of Bekhten presented him with his eldest daughter. Pharaoh accepted the princess and took her back to Egypt, making her the chief royal wife. She was named Ra-Neferu. Years later, her sister Bent Reshet became ill. The Prince of Bekhten asked Pharaoh for help. He sent a physician, but her illness was the work of an evil spirit. Pharaoh then went to the temple of Khonsu Nefer Hetep and asked the god to heal her. The god confronted the evil spirit, immediately causing it to leave Bent Reshet. The prince tried to keep the powerful Khonsu in Bekhten, but after 3 years he returned home. The prince felt ashamed for trying to keep the god there and thanked him by sending many gifts and offerings. When the tribute arrived in Egypt, the pharaoh placed it at the foot of the statue of Khonsu in the Great Temple. 8. The God of Mummies. Anubis is the son of Set and the goddess Nephthys. His mother doted on him and loved him dearly, but his father was cold and never seemed to care for him much. In some versions of this myth, Set suspects that Anubis is not really his son but Osiris's, or, in some versions, Ra's son. Because of this, he learns to stay out of sight. He becomes stealthy, like the jackals that he loves to watch. He watches them hunt and kill, but also watches them scavenge the bodies of the dead. It gives him lots of time to consider the nature of life and death and how the two are intertwined. Eventually, he decides to become the ruler of the underworld. Neither of his parents are surprised. Anubis enjoys his position in the underworld and would have gladly done it for eternity, but when his father kills his beloved uncle, Anubis journeys back to Earth to help his aunt, Isis, prepare Osiris's body. In doing so, he creates the first mummy, setting the standard for how humans should treat the bodies of their loved ones after death. When Osiris returns to the underworld, Anubis happily steps aside, allowing Osiris to take the throne. From that day onward, Osiris rules the underworld, and Anubis becomes the god of funeral rites and mummification. He is happy to be able to work so closely with his uncle father. 9. The goddess of the waters. Tefnut, Ra's only daughter and one of the first goddesses ever created, was annoyed. Ra spends all of his time worrying about his great-grandchildren, who were constantly causing trouble with their petty squabbles. Adding insult to injury, Isis was by far the most beloved goddess in Egypt. Even though Tefnut is the goddess who brings them the rain and the waters of the Nile, they praise Isis for flooding it each year. Having had enough, Tefnut decides to run away. Ra ignores his pouty daughter, but Thoth, god of wisdom and the tongue of Ra, isn't so sure. As Egypt becomes drier and drier, Thoth realizes it's getting increasingly difficult to speak Ra's words into being. He pleads to Ra to send for Tefnut and bring her home. Eventually, Ra relents, sending both Thoth and Tefnut's brother husband Shu to convince Tefnut it's time to come home. When they finally find her, Tefnut does not want to return. It is only after Thoth proclaims her the most honorable of the gods that Tefnut relents. From that day onward, the Egyptians and the gods recognized that the goddess of the waters was indeed most honorable in such a dry land. 10. The goddess of happiness gets angry. Hathor, the Eye of Ra, is beloved by humans and gods alike. She loves to dance among the mortals and bring them pleasure and joy. She gives people beer to lift their spirits and releases them from worry or care. When Ra comes to her and demands she be the one to take vengeance on the humans for disrespecting him, Hathor doesn't know if she can do it. She loves mortals. But once she starts listening to their ugly taunts, she finds herself flying into a rage. So Hathor transforms herself into a mighty lioness and kills every mortal she encounters. She kills so many that they begin to call her Sekhmet, the goddess of war. Ra is impressed but also fearful. If Sekhmet keeps this up, there will be no one left to worship him. He enlists the other gods to help him control Sekhmet. While she sleeps, the gods brew the most potent beer that has ever been made. They make oceans of it. Ra has them dye it red so it looks like blood and they spread it all around Sekhmet while she sleeps. When she wakes up, she begins to drink, believing it to be the blood of all the mortals she killed the day before. As she drinks, her rage slips away and Sekhmet goes to sleep. Hathor, the peaceful goddess of love, has returned. Sekhmet still exists, however, and makes a ferocious appearance from time to time. Thank you very much for watching the video. Please like, share and subscribe.